Hi, my name is Tyler Duffy, and I'm the host of the Building the Bridges to a Better Future podcast. I was born and raised in Lacombe, Alberta, spending my formative years growing up on a buffalo ranch. After high school, I became a power engineer and spent 11 years working in the energy industry. I left that career behind and moved on to study a psychology degree at Red Deer Polytechnic. While completing that degree, I read one thing that stuck in my head that began to change my thinking, shape my beliefs, and ultimately guide my decisions from that point forward. The Canadian Mental Health Association had published some research that said that 80% of lifelong mental health issues have their root in early childhood trauma. Let me say that again. 80% of lifelong mental health issues have their root in early childhood trauma. Now that got me thinking. Does that mean that 80% of lifelong mental health issues are preventable? So research has shown that early childhood trauma is one of the major causes to lifelong mental health issues. So I feel, as a society, we should recognize that and implement programs to reduce, buffer, and eliminate early childhood trauma. Otherwise, we will never be taking a preventative approach to mental health issues. We will be locked in a perpetual process of reacting to mental health issues when they surface later on in life. Like the old saying goes, rather than mop up the bleeding, you gotta stop the bleeding. Now, this was new information to me, but professionals in psychology, education, and the social work world are well aware of this. And community leaders in Red Deer had started to create programs to address this issue by increasing the amount, variety, frequency, and quality of social support the kids get at critical stages in their social and emotional development. The hypothesis is that if we implement positive social support programs for youth and maintain them over years so that they become a permanent part of the Canadian culture, then it may be possible to turn the tide and begin a downward trend in the number of people that struggle with mental health issues in future generations. In this podcast, we will be interviewing the key people that created these programs and have worked tirelessly for 20 years to maintain them. The goal is to share what we've done in Red Deer, why we have done it, and how you can do the same in your community if you're passionate about taking a preventative approach to mental health as well. Come and check it out as we begin to build the bridges to create a better future. Okay, welcome back to the season 2 of the Building the Bridges to a Better Future podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Duffy, and we are here talking with Kailee Burkinshaw from the Sendero Centre. So if you've been tuning into the podcast, you know what it's all about, but basically, if you haven't been, this podcast is all about raising awareness that long-term mental health in adulthood is very strongly correlated to successful early childhood development. So that's what we're interviewing people in this podcast who work in that early childhood development field, because if kids go through all the transitions of childhood development successfully, then they tend to succeed later in life. And I remember this is the one stat that kind of changed my life forever once I read it, right? But it was, I was doing a literature review and it said 80% of lifelong mental health illnesses have their root in unresolved early childhood trauma. Right. Does that resonate with you? Is that with?
It does. It's true. Yeah. And especially in our line of work, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's let Kailee introduce herself and tell us about your position in Red Deer.
Sure. So yes, I'm Kailee Burkinshaw. I am the Education and Community Relations Lead at the Sendero Centre. So what that essentially means is that we're the outward-facing kind of arm of the organization. I've been in this specific position since January 2024, though I started as an educator in August 2020. We're going backwards from there. I was an educational assistant for 2 years with Red Deer Public. I really enjoyed that job. I really loved working with the kids. But during that time as well, I was also a volunteer on Sendero's crisis line and their hospital response team, which kind of brought me into the education in Sendero role. I find that it became almost like a blend between the two. So I really enjoyed what I was doing in both. But because my schooling was more in sociology, wanting to be in human services, I really wanted to find a job that would complement both. So I was very thankful for the Sendero Centre for giving me the opportunity to be a volunteer. But then when I applied, they were very happy that I did. So yeah.
Perfect. And can you tell us a little more specifically what the Sendero Centre does and who their clients or who they cater to? What services do they provide to Central Alberta?
Sure, absolutely. So the Sendero Centre has been around for almost 40 years. We'll be celebrating 40 years next year. I always love telling this story because it's true. In the 80s, it was identified by a group of individuals that they needed some kind of sexual trauma or violence response. Whether it was dealing with sexual abuse or sexual assault, the citizens of Red Deer were saying, we need some kind of support. So through applying for grants and conversations with the RCMP, we like to say that our story started around a folding table with a telephone, 4 volunteers and a counselor. They were responding to the first line, and anybody who needed support could call that line and have that listening ear. So really the crisis line in its first iteration really started there. And as an agency, we really have always met the need of our community. So while we were dealing with sexual trauma support, the community then began to identify, well, we're having more issues with mental health. We're seeing more youth and adults go through suicide ideation. So could you lend your support towards that? So they said, yes. So they did that for a little while, but then the RCMP again approached Sendero and said, hey, we need you to be sexual trauma support again. So kind of from the splintering of that, my understanding is that's how we got the outreach center, or the outreach center started to support with, again, that mental health need. But then Sendero kept on with sexual trauma support. Now, we've gone through a couple names over the years, so I call it Sendero now, but we were formerly the Central Alberta Sexual Assault Support Center. So there might be many in the community who know it by that name. And we've kind of picked up the support name and dropped the support name and extended our name and made a different acronym. But when we moved into this building, we started to identify that this is a new step for us. We were looking at our name and we were like, are we still serving the community with our current name? It's a long name, it's a long acronym. It can be confused for other organizations in the agency or in the nonprofit world. So we wanted to be clear, like, well, can we do a different name? So when we were looking at different names, one of the proposed ones was Sendero. Sendero means pathway in Spanish. And we really like that because that could represent the pathway to healing from sexual trauma. So for many community, that might be our prevention education. That might be where they stop. Or maybe they'd identify that they would like counseling, police court support, crisis support. Wherever somebody is in their pathway to healing, we have the supports that are there. So, and we like to say that we walk along any person's path. So if they're ready, great. If they need to put us down for a little bit while, that's okay. We have lots of clients who maybe started their journey when they were children and then came back as adults. Maybe perhaps when they became parents or grandparents, they're looking for support for their families. So really, we're here for anybody because we know anybody can be impacted by sexual trauma. The youngest we serve is about 4 years old, keeping in mind that that might not be the direct survivor, that might be their family member, because we provide support to parents and the siblings as well. I always joke it's age 4 to 100, but really anybody at any time. Could be any gender, any stage, historically, recently, directly, indirectly. Even if people just have questions, or maybe they're supporting somebody who's going through it as a partner, as a friend, as a staff member, etc., then we provide support for them as well.
Great, that's awesome to share. Thank you. Mm-hmm. It kind of triggered something that I remember that always stuck with me from Gabor Mate. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Maybe not, but maybe remind me.
Anyways, yeah. He worked, he's a medical doctor, and then he went into the mental health field, and he ended up working on East Hastings Street in Vancouver.
Yes.
With, like, you know, pretty much everybody he was working with was drug addicts on the street, right?
Yes.
And I remember him saying in one of his speeches that I went to that he said, out of all the people he treated in 10 years there wasn't one of them that didn't experience early childhood sexual abuse. So that just kind of, pinged my ears a little bit, and I was like, wow, that's, if everybody there went through that, those can be some hard scars to deal with, and if they're not dealt with, or if they're not dealt with properly and early on, it's, that's a possible outcome.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can see that, and it's good. Yes, I had heard of his work before, I just couldn't remember the name.
Yeah.
But that is why we serve as young as we do, and that often does surprise people. But if we're not supporting the whole family, or perhaps not supporting that survivor, yes, that can be an outcome they experience later in life, for sure.
Well, let's dig into the questions that we drew up.
Sure, absolutely. Ask me your questions.
So the first one we already got covered. Introduce yourself and your background in the role. The Sendero Centre, what are their goals and objectives? I think you did a pretty good job of covering that one already as well. Do you have anything else you want to
If you want to throw the mission statement to something I always throw out.
Sure, yeah, let's do that. So, what are the goals and objectives in the mission statement of Sendero?
So the Sendero Centre is committed to ending sexual violence, principally in central Alberta, but again, we support Alberta, we support Canada. We are committed to ending sexual violence and promoting healing, safety, renewal, education, and support. Basically, our goal is healthy, safe, respectful relationships and communities. That's our goal. So whether that's through education and awareness, perhaps providing various forms of counseling, police and court support, especially helping adults navigate their system choices. So whether it's making a complaint, making a statement, going through court, pre, post, prep, all the jazz, or through the crisis line. Our crisis line is the only one that's available 24/7 across Alberta, but realistically we'll support anybody that calls. So often we get callers across Canada because we are one of the first that you type up 24/7 support. But we were the first in Alberta to also be that 24-hour support, that crisis line. So yeah, that's the overview of all that we do. But I really like sharing that mission statement because often with education we get that question of why is the center in our school teaching our kids this? But we're guided by our mission in order to do that. So if the goal again is healthy, safe, respectful relationships and communities, I'm sure that's something that anybody can get on board to.
Yeah, that is a great mission statement for sure. What are some of the key statistics around early childhood sexual abuse in Alberta that you feel people should be aware of?
To be honest with you, as an educator, I always like to go by my notes and everything. So I do have a couple quick reference points beside me.
That's totally fine.
But where I'm pulling my statistics from, in case anybody wants to look this up, in fact, I encourage people to look this up, is that the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Support Services, which we're a member under, they actually did a study in 2019 to 2020. So the last time that there was actually a study done about sexual abuse in Canada, nationwide, was in 1984.
Oh, wow.
That was the Badgley report. So looking at the statistics from that, again, Alberta Association wanted to see, has anything changed? Or how is this affecting Alberta specifically? Because ASAS wants to support all members and of course support all Albertans, but if we don't have updated stats to do that, that doesn't direct funding, that doesn't direct where the services are needed. So from that ASAS study in 2020, there was a couple key points that were given because of couple statistics that were given by that. So what they found is up to 45% of Albertans have experienced sexual assault or abuse in their lifetime, up to 1 in 2 Albertans.
Wow.
So if you look at, again, and they break down in the study whether it is when it happens or whether it's physical or non-physical contact that is under the umbrella of sexual trauma and violence, but yeah, up to 45% of Albertans have experienced it at some point in their lifetime. If you want to break that down further, that could be 2 in 3 females or 1 in 3 males. Yeah.
I see.
Which, again, like people are often surprised that the number is that high.
Yeah.
I think what studies also help us do is myth bust a little bit, because we have this perception of what is sexual trauma or who is impacted by it or how often it happens. But by having studies like this, it proves no, unfortunately, this is something that's happening in our community from an education and awareness standpoint. We often are told, oh, this doesn't happen here, this doesn't happen in our community. But statistics like that, which are representative of all the zones in Alberta, tell us, unfortunately, yeah, it is happening.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when I was doing my psychology degree, I volunteered at the methadone clinic for a while just to kind of get some experience. And when I learned the amount of people that were clients at the methadone clinic to deal with opiate addiction, I was like, holy cow, I had no idea it was that, because it's, that's not really a headline news, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it highlights, awareness of how much programs are needed. Alrighty.
I do have maybe another stat, because especially you focus on children and youth. I found this stat to be really impactful because it also shows why early intervention is important. So 3/4 of survivors were under the age of 18 for at least one incident of sexual abuse and assault. And then half of those survivors experienced sexual assault as an adult as well. So unfortunately, what we're seeing is a high number of children and youth who are experiencing this child sexual abuse and assault in younger years. So that's another reason why it's important to be preventative as well, is to meet really children and youth where they're at. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. So what do you feel is important for the public to know when it comes to barriers to seeking assistance or education with early childhood sexual abuse?
I think there's two ways to look at this. If it's, say, survivor-led, what are some barriers to survivors even reaching out? I think part of that is awareness of where to go, kind of what services are offered. I think people knowing that we kind of welcome all stages of life and all walks of life. We're non-denominational, we serve all people, all genders. Even the idea that we serve men kind of can surprise people. I've often seen men walk in here as clients, and they're not just fathers, they're not just grandparents, they are also survivors themselves who are ready to maybe approach that step of healing. So I think that's really affirming for people to know, is that regardless of where you're at in life, like, we are very welcoming of you, like, please come, we'll help support. And if it's not us, I usually say who else, it's usually the rest of the community. That could be related to, again, not knowing who we serve. That could be related to some guilt and shame about what happened. Really, let's rip off the Band-Aid. Like, sexual trauma and assault is a very taboo conversation. People don't have it. People don't have it outside their homes or outside their families. In fact, often this is happening in families. Sexual abuse and assault is about power and control. It's not about sex. Sex is just the method used to cause that power and control, but it means that anybody is capable of doing it. So often people don't reach out because they look at their relationships and they're like, this was somebody close to me who I loved, who cared about me, who I should have trusted to keep me safe, but instead they use this to harm me to get that power and control. So sometimes that can be hard for people to kind of untangle. They maybe want support, they maybe recognize that something's not right or something's wrong, but they just don't know how to really untangle that. So our clinicians, our police court support worker, like, they know how to have those conversations and to kind of help walk people through that. So that definitely can be a barrier to people reaching out, is that guilt, that shame, that awareness. Access sometimes, we're fortunate to be located on Red Deer Polytechnic campus. You can see our building from the highway. We're available with bus lines and taxis and everything else. But if people don't know that you can come to the center, absolutely. We're the only service provider in this building that also serves adults. We support children and youth, as does all of our partners in this building, but we're the only one that supports adults too. So sometimes even that awareness is important. To the second part of your question with education, sometimes I see it as a little bit of, again, lack of awareness, maybe perhaps some hesitation and fear. I'll say I'm not a parent myself. Many of my team members, actually all my team members now are parents, but I can see that as a parent. Why is the sexual assault center coming into my kid's school? What are they teaching? Do I as a parent feel comfortable and confident to help support these conversations at home, right? What do I have in my toolbox? Because I can't teach what I don't know. So if I don't feel comfortable having this conversation, if I don't feel like I have control over what my kids are learning, that might be a barrier then to them saying, hey, yes, you can come teach my child. But to help with that, because we recognize it, we provide schools parent letters and opt-in and opt-out forms and parent-teacher information sessions. So we can arrange with the school that if a parent wants to hop on and ask us a question about programming, what we're doing, who we are, we provide that opportunity. Because you want as much awareness as possible. Like, hey, yeah, this is what we're coming to teach your kids. It's nothing scary, it's fun. We have all kinds of materials and tools to help this conversation with kids, and they love it. I've heard a lot of feedback from students, parents, staff members, community members, like they enjoy our programs because it's an easy way to talk about what we're talking about.
That kind of just piqued my curiosity a little bit, like, so, because it is a heavy topic.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably why a lot of times, people don't talk about it, because they're like, if I bring this up, it's going to blow up the family situation, right? So what are some of the tactics and stuff that you use to facilitate and open up conversations about something that is a hard conversation to have?
Well, when I think about it, like, part of it is that respect and safety piece. Really what we're talking about is showing respect to our bodies, which can look like treating everybody's body with kindness and respect, respecting boundaries, recognizing we have to take care of our bodies, and sometimes we need help from adults to help us take care of our body. But it's important for kids to know that, yeah, I'm the boss of my body. I decide who helps take care of me. I decide what happens to it. So it's that respect piece of, I can make my decisions for my body, and it's okay if adults help me, but I'm still in that control, because again, power and control is the core of child sexual abuse. So if they recognize that they have power and control of their own body, they can then recognize, oh, if somebody takes away my power and control, that's not safe, which leads into the second point of, we teach safe and unsafe actions and words. Sometimes programs like ours might use good and bad, like good touch and bad touch, which can be okay, but it does kind of begin to confuse, what is that touch? Or what if a bad touch actually felt good? Or am I a bad person because I experienced this touch? And the answer is no, of course not. So we frame it by safe and unsafe actions and words. Kids will already know what is safe. They will already feel that feeling. With healthy childhood development, that's why those key first 5 years, it's really important to build that bond, that trust, that sense of safety and connection. And often by the time we're teaching in elementary school, many kids will know that and understand that. They'll know who their safe adults are. But when we teach them unsafe actions like hitting, right? That's an obvious one to help ease us in the conversation, but unsafe actions could be touches to private parts of our body covered by a swimsuit or underwear. So if they begin to recognize that if that's happening, if somebody's looking, touching, or taking pictures of those private body parts in that language, in that way, then it's like, oh, that's an unsafe action. That makes me feel like I don't have power and control of my body anymore. I don't feel respected anymore. And then we round out the conversation by reminding them, well, who are your safe adults? Who's at home, school, and community? Who can you talk to about what has happened? Because that's an important part of the advocacy as well, is when we give students and children the language to understand, this is what's safe for my body, or unsafe, or disrespectful, well, then what do I do with that? Then I go and tell. And I tell a safe adult, and I keep telling a safe adult until I get help for my body. So often the language we use, the tone we use, is even exactly how I'm explaining it to you. Because, yeah, it's a heavy topic, but it doesn't have to be taught in a scary way. Never in front of a child am I saying the words child sexual abuse. I'm not, because safe and unsafe can also impact us when we are talking about friends, when we're talking about even bullying behaviors early on. We're setting the stage that they can begin to recognize different forms of abuse or harm, and then know what to do if they experience it. So really, we're kind of seeing it from all sides, but of course our goal with our youngest program, our No Secrets program, is preventing child sexual abuse. And if it's happening, how can you go and tell somebody about it?
Gotcha. So is that like group settings in class?
Yeah, in classrooms.
Classrooms,
yeah. We work with schools, so schools will invite us in. We say to them, we can offer this program to you, but it's up to you to reach out to us. They talk with me about what that scheduling looks like. But yeah, we come right into classrooms. We have an entire team of educators that can go and teach in a school, which helps because we can serve up to 140 schools in our region.
Wow.
Yeah, we work with a lot of our school divisions around. We work with public, Catholic, Cree, And we've had a couple private schools reach out to us as well. So really, we're here to provide that education and awareness. So we'll work with anybody.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, the answer to this question I feel is very important. So if childhood sexual abuse or trauma is not dealt with or addressed in early childhood when it's happening, how can that affect that person later on in life?
I appreciate that question because it's often a question we get, like, why is prevention important? Like, why should we go in and teach as early as we do? Because realistically, if we don't kind of support or advocate for that child and youth when they're young and when it's happening, there could be many outcomes. One of the ones that I typically think is the most common is, again, kind of what you spoke about with some of our folks that are experiencing homelessness, addiction. They absolutely, that could be a factor in why they're experiencing that, is that child sexual abuse. If we think about the core of what child sexual abuse is, it's often a person in a position of power, trust, or authority who has used that position against a child and youth. That's caused them harm, to make them feel unsafe, all the yucky, disgusting feelings that they feel. So if a child or youth doesn't have that ability to kind of work that situation out, work those feelings, or perhaps begin to gain that trust back to adults or to other folks, maybe that affects their self-esteem. They feel that sense of worthlessness. I don't feel loved. I don't feel like I belong. I feel othered. It could be in how they choose to deal with it. Again, drugs, alcohol could be a factor. But even if we think about relationships too, I think that that's one that's often not talked about. So how is that going to affect your ability to relate to your peers? Are you going to feel that powerlessness and then be more likely to use bullying behaviors and to target somebody else because you want to try and feel better? Or maybe if you're in a dating relationship, you don't have that sense of what your worth is. So does that put you up to maybe re-experiencing sexual assault or trauma? Or do you maybe perpetrate that against others? Now, that's not causation. I would say that that's a rare case, and there's lots of more factors that contribute to somebody who might be later in life use those behaviors and offend. But that, again, can affect even the connection, the relationship, how you express that. Some people become really adverse to sex, and some people become hypersexual, which can be an impact. It could be about, even again, like I always go back to their sense of worth, right? That could be a huge impact. How they want to feel connected to their community, how maybe they want to respond to their community, how they relate to their own family. So again, because we support kind of all ages and stages, it's great that we see a lot of parents or grandparents who will recognize, like, okay, my kid is now becoming the age that I was when I was first abused. I'm recognizing that this is affecting me in my parenting and how I connect to my child. So I want to approach healing, and I want to talk about that with somebody and kind of unpack that. We'll have grandparents come because they recognize, you know, I'm in a later stage of life. I don't have this role anymore within my family, or at least in the same way, so I'm ready to approach it. Because sometimes you put up the barrier of, you know, I have to be the strong provider, or I have to be that mom that takes care of all the kids. So even how it might affect those roles too, right? You might put away your own healing in order to provide for your children, which again can be very rewarding and beneficial. But then if that's underlying and undercutting that person, that could be hard too. So yeah, I hope I answered your question in a good way.
That's a hard question to answer. It's a multifaceted answer, I guess.
It is,
And I guess, like, from my perspective is, you know, when I was doing my psychology degree, it wasn't, you know, in the sexual trauma world, but I was focusing on, like, identity formation research, right? And basically with that, you know, that kind of, when you're it's kind of the puberty stage, right? When you're going from that childhood stage to the adolescent stage.
Yes.
If kids don't navigate that successfully, that can have long-term effects on their mental health. And I think with any kind of trauma, whatever it is, emotionally developmental challenges or conflicts, the longer that they go unaddressed, and the further that person ages and carries it with them without addressing it, I think it increases the risk factor.
It does.
So I think, you know, it's like with anything, like any problem, the sooner you address it to the point of it happening, the better. Is that, does your knowledge reinforce that, or am
I appreciated that you said risk factor, because I think that that has a huge hand that maybe people forget, or it's that awareness of there's protective factors and risk factors. So that'll also go into, again, a person might have a lot of protective factors. They still might experience assault and abuse. A person might have a lot of risk factors. They might never. So that's also an important consideration of that's who it impacts. But I think protective and risk factors can also talk about healing as well. It's true. If there could be an outcome that if we don't deal with child sexual abuse in childhood when it is happening, that can have long-term impacts as well. But I do want to speak to really the resiliency of a lot of our clients who do come back into adulthood and later adulthood, and they come back and they're ready to heal. And they do make those steps and they do heal, which I think, again, going back to my experience with crisis line and hospital volunteering, that was one of the most impactful thing about that role for me, is just seeing really the resiliency in people. I only caught them in like a moment in time, but you could tell that even in that really dark moment, there was still hope. They still wanted to know their options. They still wanted that guidance to be like, where can I go next? What are my options that are available to me? So it really speaks to that as well, is that, yeah, protective and risk factors are super important, both for preventing it and healing it. So, yeah.
Gotcha. So that kind of put me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So is there, can we elaborate on what protective factors are and what risk factors are, and maybe how people can increase protective factors in themselves and those around them?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Protective factors absolutely can be having a collective of safe adults around us. And often we'll hear that family is the most important relationships that we have. Absolutely. They're our first educators. They're our first model of what a healthy relationship can be. But I think it's also important when we're talking about child sexual abuse to really have kind of like, the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. That's true with the protective factors for child sexual abuse. When a child understands that they can go to different people in their family, different people in school or in the wider community, or perhaps like crisis lines and supports, that increases the chance that an adult is going to notice when something's going sideways with somebody, that something looks kind of uncomfortable, or there could be an abuse of power in that situation. So more adults will pick that up. It also helps that the child and youth can know, even if I tell one person and they don't believe me, or they minimize what I said, I can still go to this other group of people and talk to them. So having that kind of wrap around a child is super important. Supportive, safe, respectful relationships and modeling that. Conflict resolution and communication is really important. Understanding like healthy sexuality. I like to say that, sexual health education is violence prevention. Not all violence prevention has to be sexual health. You can have many of these conversations without bringing a sexual health lens, but helping to empower parents to be like, hey, if you didn't know sexual health education when you were a kid, you can still learn it as an adult. There's so many resources out there that kind of can provide that wraparound for your child as well. More knowledge is better, right? More understanding is better. Absolutely. When it comes to, say, risk factors, I would say that could be things like unhealthy, safe, disrespectful, violent relationships, especially in the home. It could be not that sense of belonging or community, low self-esteem. It could be that isolation. So children...
Yeah, isolation is a big one. We are not meant to be, we're not a species that evolved in isolation. We have, we're a collective, tribal kind of species in our evolutionary history, right? So yeah.
Exactly, and children still remain vulnerable to child sexual abuse because they're isolated. They have to rely on adults to get them to and from school or to activities or not activities. Families might keep their child or youth at home, which keeps them in the home. They don't talk then to other adults. They don't talk to other kids. Even if kids have lots of different friends and they're seeing, oh, this is what this household looks like. This is a healthy relationship versus not, right? Sometimes they might be aware of, oh, this doesn't happen in this family, but it does with mine. And then they might begin to question, is this healthy? Is this safe? Is this okay? Like, am I okay? Can I get support? So yeah, that sense of community is super, super important, because isolation absolutely can be a risk factor for kids.
Yeah, Sean Granger's one guy that I've interviewed for a previous podcast, and I worked with him when I was doing my psychology degree on that and creating that. We called it Nights in Training at the time. But anyways, when I was interviewing him for application for a documentary. But anyway, so he was talking about that in that grade like 8 stage-ish or something like that. He's like, it's at some point in elementary school, if kids are living in a disadvantaged environment, when they're going to school and starting to form peer relationships outside of that, he says when they realize that their home environment is much different than other people's, he says it hits them like a ton of bricks, because for their whole life that's been normal.
Absolutely.
Right? And then they learn that, their normal is actually, not okay.
Yeah.
So that was, he's worked with taught young kids in schools, and that's one thing he talked about that I thought was very impactful.
And the reason that resonates so well with me, and my team and I will agree on this, is that we'll often see what we call the light bulb moment in class. And that has happened in kindergarten, that has happened in grade 6, that's happened in a COM or grade 12 class. When we're having some of these conversations, you can almost see that light bulb moment where they're like, oh, this hits. Like this is different. This is something that's really speaking to me. Now, whether that's because it's their own circumstance or maybe because of a friend or dating partners, even at the high school level, I get a lot of feedback from, my partner's going through this with their family, so I appreciate you telling me about this, or I know now what to do if my friends are going through this. So even that light bulb moment can also be a protective factor in a sense of, oh, I need to support other people now. I can now look out for my relationships better because I recognize what's happening to somebody I care about is not okay. So yeah, that light bulb moment when you witness it in a classroom, and it's not anything really even that big, but it's that awakening. And it is so I don't know, just as an educator, it's I feel like, okay, I reached that kid. I brought something different to them. I maybe gave them a tool that they didn't have in the past. And I don't know, that is a really powerful moment.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Sean brought up too is, that he tries to teach his other teachers, right? Is you never know when that's going to happen.
Yes.
And when it does, you got to know how to deal with it. If that kid reaches out to you and he picks you to be his safe person, it's you have to be very in tune with that's what's happening, and then know how to deal with it, because if it's like that, that kid is reaching out for help, and if you don't kind of recognize that that's what it is, and it gets brushed off sort of thing, then that decreases the likelihood that kid is going to open up again, right? And
that's a stat I've also heard, is that especially when it comes to sexual abuse, assault, violence, trauma, whatever word you want to use, if a child, youth, person doesn't feel like their first disclosure is received well or they are believed, they are less likely to report. Especially when we're talking about children and youth, the likelihood, I would say, that they would disclose again before 18 is less. And then if it's over the age of 18, some might never disclose, even into adulthood, which I'm just ooh, that's a lot to carry for a long time in your life. So I agree. How you respond in that first disclosure, you gotta just, even if you have doubts, even if you're not sure, even if you feel like you have to ask more questions, I would just lead with, hey, I believe you. I am so glad that you told me. I care about you. I'll help you figure out what to do next. Because I always want to assure people, you don't have to have all the answers, especially when you're hearing about sexual abuse and trauma. That's a lot. People don't often expect that. That'll take somebody out, right?
Yeah,
right?
I think that's something you need training to know how to deal with, right?
It's it's funny you mentioned that. There's actually a couple different options for training.
That's a good topic to dive into, yeah.
Yeah, so the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services recognize the need for this. Whether you're a professional or an everyday man, people want to feel more confident in responding and knowing, how do I respond to a child or youth, or how do I respond to an adult? How do I respond to an adult who's been recently assaulted versus one that maybe happened in childhood? So they offer what is called first responders training to sexual abuse and assault. long name. We love our acronyms in nonprofit, so we call it FRT training. So that's a 2-day, full-day paid training that people can take online or in person. But the goal is to develop that skills, knowledge, and awareness of what is sexual trauma and how to respond to it. Within Sendero Centre, we will always refer that, especially if people want a deeper dive. But for many folks, including some of our school staff, some of our other nonprofits, businesses, they're like, okay, we don't have capacity for 2-day, but we definitely want the Coles notes. So we offer a presentation called Supporting Disclosures to Sexual Assault and Abuse, or Supporting Disclosures. So that's where we can have that conversation of, here's the Coles notes of what you need to know for responding, where to report, where to refer, how to do it, and then how Sendero Centre is that support as well, especially within our region. So if people want to reach out to us, we can definitely book that with your business, your school, your nonprofit, etc. If they want the 2-day full-day training, I'm now becoming a facilitator of that program, so I can teach it. But also people can reach out to ASAS, especially if Northern Alberta, you want a virtual presentation. We got wonderful people up there, we got down south, etc. So yeah, reaching out is important. But the good news is that we recognize, like, hey, this is a community need. This is what our community is asking for, so how can we provide that to them? So whether you want the deep dive or the short version, we got you covered.
Can you do like just a short coverage of like the Coles notes?
Absolutely, I can.
Sort of things that would be beneficial to me, because I'll admit, if somebody came out and picked me as their person to disclose that to, I would probably have a little bit of a foot in my mouth moment and be like, what is the problem?
Yeah.
What is the best way to respond? So yeah, let's maybe go through the Coles notes.
Coles notes. It's okay to take a second, honestly, take a deep breath. But I would start with, thank you for telling me. Do you want to go talk about this maybe in private or aside, especially if somebody kind of catches you kind of off guard? An example, like we do awareness kind of initiatives. So we might go to an event, a farmer's market, a booth, and people often disclose in those spaces. So then I might bring them to like the side of the table or kind of a couple steps away. I'll ask them like, are you safe? That's usually a good question to ask, especially if somebody has been recently assaulted. If they're still in that circumstance, might have to do some other safety planning. But for the most part, people are disclosing of past harm. So I say, thank you. I believe you. What would you like to do next? Especially if they're an adult. That's where we would refer services. So that might be bringing in, hey, maybe we'll call the Sendero Centre together, or I'll give you their number. You can reach out and see how they can support you. There's no referral needed. It's no charge. We don't charge for any of our services. We'll help you through the steps. So you might refer to services like us, like other partners in the area. It might be our CMP. For a child and youth, that's a little different. So under Alberta law, specifically the Child, Family and Youth Enhancement Act, any adult, regardless of their relationship to a child or youth, if they hear anything that they suspect to be childhood abuse, including sexual abuse, they have to report that to either Child and Family Services or the RCMP. I'd recommend Child and Family Services first, because they'll be able to kind of coach you through taking in that information and next steps, because I'll often hear from schools like, oh, should we call the parents first? And I'd be like, no, you don't call the parents first. And the reason being is because the parent might be either the person perpetrating it or aware of the person who's perpetrating it, so it might not be safe for that child and youth, especially because Child and Family Services may or may not proceed with that. But they can coach you through and say, yeah, this is a situation where you would inform in parents versus hang on, not so. So with children and youth, you always want to provide that report and kind of take down as much information as you can to suspect. Now, that's not necessarily interrogating questions, because we only need to report when we suspect, like, okay, something has happened and I need to report it. You don't have to be investigators. Our CMP, the people upstairs who do the interviews, wonderful people, they got it covered. For us, it's just knowing, hey, something's happened, we need to report it, but then making sure that person and that child and youth feels like, okay, they feel supported, they feel valued, heard, seen, believed. And that could be very much like person-led. And that's the biggest Coles notes I can provide, is that we can provide all the supports and services, but that person might not be ready to take it, or they might just have lots of choices within. So whether that is like, hey, do you need like a drink of water or something to eat? Do you need a break? Can we call somebody to help you out? Do you have supports and services? Are you aware of what's out there? When I'm talking to a child and youth, it's like, does anybody else know about this? Can we talk about this with somebody in your school? Because that's my first point of contact when I'm in those spaces. They'll often say yes. They'll identify who that is for them. But basically, I like to say that there's no right or wrong way, honestly. As long as that person feels...
And there's probably not a cookie cutter way where it's like, this is going to work every time, right? It's a case by case basis. But certain tactics you use.
Yeah, certain things to be aware of. And honestly, even if you get stuck, I believe you. Thank you for telling me. We'll figure it out. That's easy for anybody to do because that covers everything that everybody needs to be believed, valued, heard, seen. And it's okay if you don't have the answer to where to go next. Like Sendero Centre, again, like if it's not us, who else is usually what I say. Because people reach out to us all the time, not even related to sexual trauma, but we're like, okay, we're not going to leave you hanging. We'll provide referrals or tell you kind of where to go next. So, yeah.
Gotcha. I think that covered that very well. I think that's kind of getting us towards our final question here. So based on everything that we've talked about today, what can people do in their everyday life to help youth in their community cope with trauma and develop resiliency?
I love that question. No, I really do, because often like people will ask me like, oh, like you talk about hard stuff all the time. Do you hate it? And I'm like, I'm on the prevention education side. There's a lot of hope in that sphere. So yeah, what can everyday people do? I always encourage communication. Usually encouraging like, hey, if something happens, go talk to somebody about it, go tell somebody. Or if you're a parent or an adult, be open to hearing what your kids and youth are into. Be curious about their online spaces, be curious about their friends, ask them, how are they doing? What are they hearing about? Do they feel like safe with that person? Is anything kind of weird with that person? Like always kind of question, always be curious. It's okay to set boundaries and limits, often with online safety too. Like that's a big topic. We could be here for hours talking about that. But I have a lot of requests come through for what do I do in online spaces? And again, having some boundaries, rules, that's okay. That's what kids want. They just want some guidelines to be like, hey, if I have permission to explore the world, great. But how do I know what is my limit? How do I know how to stay safe within those? And who do I go back to talk to? So having limits and boundaries, especially online, perfectly okay. Always be curious. It's okay if you don't know. So I always say like, reach out for sexual health resources, any conversation about boundaries, respectful, safe relationships, follow social media, follow media. You can follow our social media. We're usually resharing, again, resources or things to kind of keep in mind. Visit your local library, visit public spaces, right? Have these conversations, be open. If somebody does choose to disclose to you, take that in confidence of, hey, they trust me with this. They felt like, hey, this is a person that I can talk to about this. And that takes a lot of heart, because a lot of people, especially parents, will be like, you know, why didn't my child tell me about this? And it's not that they don't trust you. In fact, they trust you and they love you. They just felt that this is a very important relationship to them and they didn't want to upset you. So they did talk to other adults about this, and hey, that's okay. But that's because, again, that child and youth will hold value in those relationships, and that's okay. So really just curiosity, care, connection, being open, like that's something anybody can do. Follow the support services, support centers like ours. You know, we do offer our services free of charge because we're trying to remove barriers, but even in this giving season, if people want to check out our Amazon wish list or our website, our social media, figure out how to support us, we're kind of open to everything and everything. Even if it's just, hey, how can I refer people to you guys? Or how can I support you? Tell me about other agencies that are in. That's always important too, because we don't do this work by ourselves either. I'm privileged to have a team behind me that does this education and awareness. Trying to remember, I think our stats last year were 17,000 children, youth, and adults that we brought education and awareness to. And from the center, we did 26,000 total in services. So we're serving a lot of people, which is good. So people can reach out, even if they're not sure if it's a good fit. Again, they can always call, email, go through intake process. Again, better to go through that process and find that maybe it's not a great fit, but here's other resources, versus keep that to yourself, right? And I think that's another thing. What can everyday people do is just support. My last stat that I have for you is that 67% of Albertans have personally known a survivor of sexual assault and abuse, and 53% have supported them through that. So really, we know these people. They might be in our families, our workplaces, our communities. They're people we love, they're people we care about. So it's important that we look out for them, we look out for ourselves. Like, we don't do this alone. Nobody does this alone. So it's okay if you want to reach out. It's okay if you want to connect. Learn more, be curious, all those things.
Yeah, that piqued up one thing. And I remember I was listening to a presentation, and I can't remember the person's name or background, but they were researching childhood use on social media. And I think this is important for people to share. From the results of their study, they figured out that about an hour and a half a day is the cutoff point.
I agree.
An hour and a half per day is safe for kids to be on social media. Above that, that study showed, more than that, increased social and emotional problems. So that's what the research shows, is an hour and a half a day is your cutoff point for how much time screen time you should let your kids have.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because it's like we get so much human connection by talking, by being in person, by doing activities. As you said, we're a tribal people. We are a collective. So it's great, and it's important that we have relationships kind of like in online spaces and places. But don't forget, there's a lot of safety and good things that come from being in person too. And even some more of the concerns that we're having with like sexting and sextortion. Again, we could be here for hours talking about that. So if people do have questions and concerns, even about that, reach out. Some supports I can recommend are Canadian Centre of Child Protection. Fantastic one for online harm, whether it's bullying, sextortion, child sexual abuse concerns. Media Smarts is also a good one. That's digital and literacy kind of support, not just for like, they kind of talk about all different things with that, not just child sexual abuse. It's a very small part of it, but even gaining those literacy and media skills, super important when it comes to safety.
I want to rabbit hole down this one.
Bring it to me. I'm enjoying this conversation.
All right, so this is going right off script here, but this is kind of a thought that I landed on when I was digging into psychology and philosophy and stuff like that. And if you look at human evolution, we're talking millions of years of evolving from knuckle walking to up to the bipedal walking, and then anatomically correct human being is approximately 250 to 300,000 years old ish kind of thing, right? But if you look at our evolutionary history, 99% of that, essentially up until, well, whatever, but 99% of that was hunter-gatherer tribes, groups of 30 to 50 people kind of thing, right? And then the agricultural revolution happened 12,000 years ago, and then we started living in bigger and bigger cities. And then the next key point that I think played a huge role in the evolution of our, let's say, our way of life was the Industrial Revolution, because then people started moving out of small communities with that into cities, and specifically single-family dwellings. Right? Yes. Like literally building walls between ourselves. That became the standard, just for practical reasons, essentially. And I think that over time, that social support group has kind of just gotten a little smaller and smaller and smaller. I agree. I'm talking over like millennia, right?
But it's true. You're right.
But to the point now where it's I live by myself, right? And that way of life now with single family units, we don't get as much interaction with positive role models. There's less interaction between kids of different age groups as well, kind of thing. Yeah. So I think that is a risk factor. And now, so the challenge is for how does the modern man reintroduce our social emotional needs into our culture that have been pulled apart just simply due to, I think, a lack of awareness of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rabbit hole down that thought process.
Oh, I love it. I love where this is going. It reminds me, there is a documentary on Netflix that talks specifically about this. It's a guy in the States who was looking at the...
What's it called? I'm gonna have to
Oh
dig
man, if I'm allowed to pull up my Netflix either while we're filming or after, I could do it for you. But
Yeah.
so basically, this documentary on Netflix, it's an American who is looking at the lessening, the not removal, but there was less and less of these core community groups. When we talk about Rotary clubs, Kinman clubs, bowling leagues, like a lot of like different community groups that were more common, I'd say, like early 20th century, like especially like 40s, 50s, 60s, like these things were all over the place. But because of a more digital world, because of phenomenon like COVID-19, lockdown restrictions, etc., a lot of that has been falling away. So our sense of broader community has been less and less. The nice thing about a lot of those community groups is that they got strangers together. So strangers from different walks of life, belief, etc., often around common good. So again, with the Kinsmen, the Rotary groups, or even again, bowling league, like, you know, it's our team versus their team in friendly competition, that came from all walks of life. So it's funny to say this, but it's almost like people need to talk to strangers again. And let me follow this thought out, because you often hear in child sexual abuse, stranger danger. Stranger danger is kind of a harmful kind of myth, because anywhere from 80 to 90% of child sexual abuse survivors, they either knew the perpetrator or their family knew the perpetrator. So it's not strangers who are actually causing the most harm in child sexual abuse. But strangers are, again, the people that we can connect with to have that sense of community, to get to know people. Of course, guided by feelings of safety and respect and care, obviously. But it's okay that we talk to strangers. It's okay that we communicate and try and understand where people are coming from, because that's kind of what creates that takes a village. If you think about, like I was born in the mid-90s. So even from like the mid-90s to early 2000, like my brothers and I would run through the neighborhood and whatnot. We had like the summer camp and everything.
And not playing Pokemon Go either.
No.
You're running through the neighborhood because it was fun.
Running through the neighborhood was fun. But it almost felt like, because my parents knew our neighbors, they would almost keep an eye on us too. So there's almost that sense of like, yeah, when and I'm sure this is true for your age, it's like you go run the neighborhood all day, and they used to have PSAs like, hey, 10 o'clock at night, where are your kids? Are they home?
Yeah.
Because there was that sense of, again, community support around. But because we're starting to get more individual, we're starting to stay only in our family units or only retreat to online. Again, online spaces can be fine and fun. You can have community connection there, but don't forget to get outside every once in a while.
Yeah.
The kids say touch grass, and I agree. But it's good to have that community connection support, and that will involve talking with strangers or interacting with strangers.
Yeah.
We're creatures of routine. So if you think about going to the grocery store, if you go to the same grocery store around the same time and see the same people, you'll notice when that one guy who you see all the time is not there. Did he change his routine? Did something happen? Did I offend him? But that creates that sense of community.
Yeah.
Like, we like that. We like to follow those behaviors, and it's nice that we look out for each other. Again, like, guided by safety and respect, absolutely. But it's okay to talk to people. It's okay to have differing opinions or different life circumstances, as long as we're united by the sense of we're a community, we care, we want betterment for ourselves, for our families and our kids. Like, that's great. So again, it seems counterintuitive to say talk to strangers, but I think that that's where we need to return to, is having, again, that curiosity for different groups and communities and whatnot. Like, I think that'll help a lot. I think it'll help with that sense of isolation. They say there's a men's loneliness epidemic. They say there's an online epidemic. They say, like, again, like, people feel more isolated and mental health concerns more than ever. So it's just figuring out what that community looks like. And it can be different. It could be online, in person, afternoon, during the week, late at night. Yeah. Just find something that works for you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's, to me, that's something that I feel like, if we're philosophizing broadly, that's something that I feel has happened in human history, is the way we've evolved since the Industrial Revolution, culturally and whatnot. we've just forgot that we should have a clan. Like we should have a large group of people that know us, and you know, I think identity formation is a social process. You learn who you are and what your talents are from others, right?
Yeah.
And from others of people of different age groups. And if that's gone, then it creates, I think, a risk factor, kind of.
Yeah, I agree, because that goes back to, again, like if we have different adults who, or even older people who are taking care, older kids even, right? Like you remember running around in the neighborhood, there was always the group of older kids that everybody wanted to hang around because they're the cool older kids, but they also had that sense of responsibility of like looking after the young kids, right? So that's important too. So yeah, like definitely across ages, across life circumstance, like we just need to be more curious as a people, and find our community, find that goal, find that drivenness. Even if it's professional or social or casual, whatever, just find that community. I think that's a great message, great thing to strive for.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps up what we have for time here.
Yeah.
What were some key takeaways you'd like to highlight from this conversation?
I appreciate that question. I would say that what statistics tell us is that this unfortunately is happening in our communities. It is happening to many people that we may know and love and care for. If it is happening to somebody we know or somebody that even is us, there is support out there. Things will be okay. We can begin to talk about it, and if there's not people around us we can talk to, go find your people, go find your safe adults, or know that supports like Sendero Centre are here at any time of day, any time of year, especially true of our crisis line because it's 24/7. People can reach out if they have questions or concerns. Like, we don't have to do this alone. It's okay if you don't have all the answers. It's okay if it's scary and taboo too, but it's important that we seek support. It's important that we reach out and just take care of each other. Perfect. What are some key takeaways that I kind of got? I guess the biggest thing that I felt like I learned from your conversation is if somebody does, open up and disclose to you that they're going through that trauma, just make them feel believed, heard, and listened to, and not belittled in any way at all, and then get them in the right direction to find help. Yeah. Just more or less, right? Yeah. Here's an interesting question. Let's say I'm going into a hypothetical situation. This will be our closing comment. Let's say I observe a situation where I'm like, I think there is a problem there, and it's like a kid where I'm like, I think that kid is experiencing sexual abuse or whatever, but doesn't open up and come to me, right? Yeah. If I was to phone the Sendero Centre and be like, look, there's a risky situation here. I feel like it might be worth investigating, but I don't know how to proceed. Do you guys ever get calls like that? Have you ever had a call like that? That's a very interesting question. I'm really glad you asked that. I cannot speak specifically to that from our admin side. Crisis line, maybe, but again, I can't speak to that specifically. I think if anybody is in that situation where they're like, something feels really, really off, again, Child and Family Services, really great. If it's an immediate, emergency situation, RCMP is there, especially if it's immediate harm. There is the Child Advocacy Centre upstairs, so their goal is to help support families and children through abuse, primarily through the investigation and forensic exam and interview. So very much like the beginning of their journey when we're trying to collect information and immediate support to make sure that children and youth are safe. They're great for helping with that. But again, they're kind of like, if RCMP and Child and Family Services, there's a file, that's where they come in. So I know they may have fielded those calls before, but they might not be, Child and Family Services would be my first guess with that. Gotcha. Absolutely can call us, sure, but I'm just thinking in terms of what is needed in that situation, right? Mm-hmm. In that hypothetical, you're identifying a child and youth that you're like, okay, this seems really unsafe. I have reason to believe that this child has experienced abuse and harm. I should call Child and Family Services to make that report, because again, even if Child and Family Services doesn't immediately go through with that call, that's still a record. And that could be, again, so say something happens a couple days later, they have that record that calls happened. So you're now calling the second time within, say, a week span. Okay, we're going to look at this a little bit closer, right? People can always also, like, maybe say you don't know that child and youth, but somebody around you does. Like a school staff member, a coach, maybe perhaps a family member, something. Like, it's okay to check in and ask that question. And I think what that leads to is almost like bystander intervention of like, hey, I saw this and it made me feel this way. How did that make you feel? Are you noticing the same thing? Because that could be a protective factor too. Is really just seeing like, yeah, am I feeling uncomfy about this situation? And are others seeing what I'm seeing? Or are they going to start to pay attention and keep an eye out for that child and youth and be like, hey, I'm going to pay attention to what that situation is. So hopefully that helps. Again, we're here to support, but in terms of that hypothetical, I want to make sure that we're calling the most appropriate kind of response for that.
Which is Child and Family Services.
I would say is your safest bet, absolutely. Yeah. And they'll advise if you need to call somebody else or what that next step is. But I'm thinking just in terms of like purpose, getting towards urgency, best fit, I recommend that.
Gotcha. Well, I think we better clip it off there because I think we'll be chatting for another hour and a half here.
I really enjoyed this conversation, truly. Yes. You wanna chat anytime, you reach out. But well,
yeah, I'm putting in an application for season 3 of the show, so maybe we'll have a second chat and we'll dig into things a little deeper. But
absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time, Kailee. Appreciate it very much. And yeah, it's great for you to share all your knowledge and expertise. So.
Thank you. I like to say that I have a lot of knowledge. I'm not always the expert. I'm always learning and growing too, but the opportunity to do this and talk more has been very appreciated because this is my job. This is what I love to do. I love to let people know about where to go and how to get support. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Perfect. Well, that's it for this episode. Our next guest is Rania Page, and she's going to take us through what is called the 40 developmental assets, which I am super excited to learn about because I've been hearing about them on the peripheral through all of season 1 talking about this. Everybody's talking about the 40 developmental assets. Essentially what it is they figured out the amount of research done blows my mind, but they figured out there's 20 internal, 20 external, and I think if you've got 10 of each, 99% of the time people turn out fine. If they've got at least 10 of each, something like that. Don't quote me on that.
You'll learn next time.
But they've got it nailed down where it's if you have these assets, you'll be good. If you don't, these are what you need. So it's like the solution.
I love that. I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
I'll watch that episode next.
Awesome. Okay, we'll see you next episode. Thank you.